Welcome everybody to Wealth is a Team Sport Live. Today we are going to be talking with our guest expert, Kevin Simpson. So, getting into this, for those of you who are new, I believe that one of the most valuable things that you can do in life to give yourself peace of mind is learning from others. And so, thinking those bigger thoughts, life is hard enough. So anytime you can get pearls of wisdom from someone else who's been there, done that, I think it just helps us all. So I just want to welcome everybody who's near on the call today. I'm Tara Nolan, and I'm known as the advisor who helps you achieve and retain the lifestyle you want. And, I have people ask questions and say, why is a financial person having these kind of interviews? And I think it's all about asking better questions. And there's no lack of information in the world, but a big part of the challenge, especially when it comes to finance, is how do you figure out what's right for you? And so that's why we have these calls. I talk with different experts. And I also think that a lot of success in life comes from working with teams. And whether it's money or how you raise your kids or how you do your job, we all have these different circles of teams of experts that we surround ourselves with. So that's what this call is really going to be all about today. I'm going to introduce you to Kevin and read his bio here for you. Kevin is an excellent person in the finance world, and we're going to get into how he manages money. And I think his strategy is a great part of any good financial plan. So let me just give you his background so you know who we're dealing with today. So Kevin Simpson founded Capital Wealth Planning in 2005. He is also the portfolio manager. And I really like this about Kevin when I got to meet him, because his skin is in the game, because he's doing for you what he's doing for himself. So I think that's a value add. Kevin's originally from Philadelphia, and he's been investing in options since his career began. And he's worked with both institutions and high net worth individuals to help achieve their financial goals through option-centered strategies. And I'm very interested, for those of you who don't know what options are, that's going to be a unique thing that I'm going to be happy to share with you today. Kevin has developed a strategy offering separately managed ETF and equity portfolio strategies that are complemented with this covered call strategy. So a graduate from George Washington University majoring in finance, Kevin applies all of his institutional investing management strategies to diversified equity and options portfolios. So, Kevin, welcome to the call today.
Thanks for having me, Tara. And you were very kind not to expose my age and my tenure in the business, but this is my 30th year managing money professionally. So as far as credibility is concerned, I think if you stick around long enough, you start to garner some respect in the industry.
Kevin, you're so humble. I love that. Kevin is actually a regular guest on CNBC and Yahoo Finance and a lot of places. So we're actually really glad to have you. And thanks for sharing your time with us today. So let me just jump right into it, Kevin. So, after reading your background, you have like this super depth of experience. And this is what I look for in my money manager relationships, because in my business, I work with managers like you to bring that value to my clients, because, I don't think any one person can be all things to all people. So it really is, when you put the right experts together, is how you really help someone kind of maximize their financial potential. But can you just share with us a little bit, like, how did you become interested in investing to begin with? I can see you majored in finance, so something pushed you in this direction.
Yeah, I can point to it very specifically. It was in 1987 during the correction. I was just fascinated by what was happening on Wall Street without any background or financial literacy of any kind. I knew nothing. And,
right.
And my father was a teacher, but it wasn't his field. And my mother certainly wasn't, she was a stay-at-home mom and wasn't following the stock market any more than I was as a senior in high school.
Right.
So when that 87 crash happened, I just dove into the stock market, never have looked back. It's always what I wanted to do. I knew I was going to be associated with it in one degree or another. And before the internet, we had to go to libraries, and the education that I gave myself was from an old-fashioned library card and lots of books.
Okay, that's fun. For some of the listeners, we'll have to explain that later.
I didn't bring in the Dewey Decimal System, Tara. I didn't want to beat myself.
So it's kind of funny. I love that your mom was a teacher. I was going to ask you, do you have a little bit of a teacher inside you? Like I said, because you've been featured regularly on Yahoo Finance, CNBC Worldwide Exchange, and CNBC Fast Money. And now you're publishing a book too. That's a lot of education for a guy that may typically just prefer numbers to people.
Yeah, well, the book was, and you and I have talked about this, privately. The book is a 10-year project, and figuring that getting it done at some point really good is better than never being done perfect. So the book is available for sure, and I think it can teach a lot of people. And to your point about education, when I would take exams or uh, any type of pre-college type of um, testing to try to point you in a direction of one career or another. I guess a career aptitude test is probably the definition, but most of the time it was teacher that I would be kind of answering the questions and directed towards. But knowing what my parents' income as as an educator, it wasn't something that motivated me quite as much as what I was seeing and reading about on Wall Street. So happy to be a teacher now at this stage of life, but yeah, it's definitely in my blood.
I want you to talk a little bit more about that because I also had a book that was kind of in a draft form in some way or another for about like the last 6 to 8 years. And what I find with money is I am a teacher at heart and I try to explain things to people. But the part about money is that there's just layers of complexity, and you hate to be like, well, it depends, because it really does depend, because there's there's the numbers, which is the easy part, but then there's like the tax code, and then there's like the regulations, and there's all these things with money that are actually not even about money, that all have to be kind of woven together to see what's going to make sense for this individual person at this point in their life. How did you get after that with the book? Because it's a lot easier, at least face to face, because you can go, okay, let me explain this to you. With the book, it's like one way, and you don't get a chance to look at the person and see their confused face and go, okay, let me tell you this a different way.
Well, Tara, you said it in the beginning, and you can't be all things to all people. And we're in a position at our firm at Capital Wealth Planning where we service financial advisors like you, great, wonderful champions for their clients around the country. But I don't have to put all of those things together. So often your mentor, your teacher, your psychiatrist, sister, mother, whenever the client needs you to be, you're going to be there for them. And that's what makes you so great at what you do. Everything that we do as money managers is applicable from a math equation, rules based. It's not having to take all those other things into effect. Now, I don't want to say that it's easy, because managing money is always a fun challenge. It's different every day. I always use the analogy, it's like live sports. That's what makes it so thrilling every morning to wake up, like, what are we going to see today? But when you hire someone like me for your clients, I'm participating in a sleeve as you see fit, as it becomes appropriate for each one of your clients' unique individual situations. So for us, it's easy to kind of put something on paper like in textbook form, because it is applications. Everything we do is process driven, rules driven. The markets are dynamic. They're going to change each and every day. The stocks that we own are going to come in and out of favor, and they're going to change all the time. But the way we identify opportunities, the way we buy, the way we sell, even to the extent of covered call writing, and maybe that's a topic we can get into a little bit here or for another show, but everything being rules based and rules driven is something that is teachable. And that's I think that's what sometimes makes my job even easier than yours.
And I'm glad you brought that up. And that is why I work with third party managers like you is, in my role, one of my primary jobs is to interface with my client and know exactly their personalities, their lifestyles, what's going on. And I really kind of like that you're in that role where you really can focus on the numbers and the money. So you're not also carrying all that personal, emotional baggage. So you can just say, hey, I've got $500,000 and I'm going to make the most of it that I can. So that's why that relationship actually works good. So that's a fair answer to that question. One of the things that we talked about when we first met that I thought would be great for everyone to listen to is this idea of being a fiduciary, because we see that word thrown around, and like when you Google, like, how do you interview a financial advisor? It always says you should ask if they're a fiduciary. What can you share what that means to you with our audience, being a fiduciary?
Well, they say it's the highest standard, and I think it compares to suitability. But in my opinion, there should be only one standard. There shouldn't be two standards. And one of the things that I talk about in the book is how to, as a client, how to find great financial advisors like you, and again, working with thousands of advisors around the country, we have a really great insight into what makes a great financial advisor. And in every instance, it's someone who's going to be putting that client first, always doing what's best for the client, never to the benefit of the financial advisor, the financial professional. And that wasn't always the case. I mean, in the 80s, you had much more of a sales component to it. Things were being pushed along the way, whether it was penny stocks or whether it was product driven or proprietary product driven. The way that the industry has evolved now into this client first, bar none, like there is no conflict, is wonderful. But it is a head scratcher to think, like, why wasn't it always that way? So clients that are coming to financial advisors now are in great hands, and very, very lucky.
And I would agree with that. And I'm so glad to hear you say that. It's one of the reasons why I'm going to enjoy working with you. With my military background, that was one of the things that floored me when I first got into finance, was that there was anything other than a fiduciary standard. And so just taking care of people. But I like to also believe, I think if you do the right thing by people, then that good karma, if you will come back. Just it's never worth it to make an extra buck. It's always worth it to take care of the person.
Everything comes around. You're 100% right. And there's your military background also that makes you a great financial advisor with fewer confused looks, because you can tell people what you're going to tell them. You tell them, and then you tell them what you told them. And that training works really well in financial counseling, I'm sure.
It really does. So now I want to jump in and talk a little bit about strategy. One of my favorite things that you said is, an up market takes care of itself. And I laugh at that, because I always talk, I was like, does anyone here have a problem with upside risk? Like, everyone likes to make money, right? and I think this question about, how much risk are you comfortable with is really the question of how much money are you comfortable losing? Because that's really what the question is. It's everyone's okay with making money. So can you talk to us about that? Because that's really what you focus on, with how that's a big part of your strategy is, the market goes up and down. So how do you tackle that?
Yeah, your comment is so spot on. Like, no client's ever calling you complaining that, hey, we made too much money, Tara, this month. What's going on? We don't think about it from that lens or that perspective, but you have
to. You promised me 4%, and now I got 10.
Yeah, it's only when we see the bottom fall out that we remember that, oh yeah, there is risk involved with any type of equity investment. So we focus everything on risk adjusted returns. How much can we participate in market upside and downside? And to your point, how much do you want to expose to risk? So even as a professional money manager, we look at it from this mindset that I try to describe it as bands. If the stock market's up, we certainly want to be up. We want to participate in rising markets, super fun. But more importantly, what does that downside exposure look like? We want to limit the amount of downside exposure we have while trying to increase as much upside capture as possible. Really, from our perspective and the way we manage money, we're not trying to beat the market. We're trying to capture most of that upside. But far more importantly is protecting that downside and being a lower participant in down markets. And you do that through risk management. You do that through, constant rebalancing, allocating, looking both, forward and backwards in terms of how your risk is associated. Because when the markets go down, and they do, corrections happen. If you can limit the downside, if you can navigate that volatility, to your point, the upside will almost always take care of itself over time.
Yeah. And I think that's like a big part of it. And if you just even do a simple Excel spreadsheet, you can look that just by not losing money, you will come out so much further ahead than by maybe capturing an amazing return here or there. Have you ever had these conversations, like people are at work and they're always talking with their buddy? Nobody ever talks about when they didn't do well, but you get people going, well, I made 25% or whatever. And people kind of get this expectation that should happen all the time. How do you kind of just moderate and educate people to go that that's not a realistic expectation every single month? That's just not the way the market flows.
Well, fortunately, I don't have the same type of interaction with the end user client. So the 25% a month expectations, I don't hear that. Fortunately, but every time I go fishing, I don't catch a fish, but I don't really talk about those times when I went out there and I got skunked, and it happens a lot. I talk about the fish that I caught, and I usually, exaggerate the size and the weight and the fight and everything else about it. With managing money, we talk about the fun parts, and that's excellent, because, who doesn't want to talk about making money? But tempering expectations and just trying to thinking about, how is real wealth created? Real wealth was created by investing in great companies, not the most aggressive companies, not trying to speculate or make a killing overnight. I think if you look at dividends, you look at compounding, you look at the power of time, those are the things that are far more valuable than anything else that can happen over short-term fluctuations. And that's the road to real wealth, 100%.
I love that. I love that. So, and this may be more detail, but do you look at anything different between someone who is if you're managing someone's money, who's in the accumulation phase of their life cycle versus somebody who's kind of in retirement and looking to live off of those dividends? Do you categorize those differently from your perspective?
No, not from my seat, because we're running a portfolio that is designed to deliver a result. And there are money managers, like me, that have all kinds of different style boxes. They could be fixed income managers, emerging markets, small cap, mid cap, large cap growth, technology, crypto, I'm sure. So our wheelhouse is working with really high quality blue chip companies that pay dividends. So we're more of a core large cap equity income portfolio. And that's where you, as a financial advisor, kind of put all those puzzle pieces together, and you make that change from a risk profile for the accumulative younger client as they're approaching retirement, and then getting into the distributive phase of financial planning. It's a tedious, long-term planning process, but it can be so rewarding when done properly. We're a piece of the puzzle that will typically come into play as someone's approaching retirement. So I would envision financial advisors are using us for baby boomer clients or pre-retirees or retirees, and whether or not they're taking a distribution from our portfolio is less relevant than the fact that they can, and at some point probably will, because we live in retirement, God willing, so much longer than we have in the old days.
Yeah, and I like that. So you really feel that niche. And the thing is a lot of us are living in retirement almost maybe even as long or even longer than we worked. So yeah, it really is. It's what you do is a huge niche that needs to be filled. Can you just talk a little bit? What values do you have, do you feel like, that drive how you handle people's money? So I like how you said, because you're the portfolio manager, so you're not having that interface directly with clients, but behind all that money is someone's lifestyle. So how do you take your values and infuse that into your business?
Well, first of all, you're dealing with people's money, and you're dealing with their retirement savings that they've accumulated their whole life to amass. So it's a big responsibility. Because we invest in the strategy, even if I was the most selfish person on the planet, I still want to do well for my money and my family's money. I don't think that I am, but it's also a good question to ask when talking with portfolio managers, because if I'm managing my money and my family's money, hopefully I care about me and my family just as much as I do our clients. So it's an incredible responsibility, and we don't take that lightly. One thing is, from a portfolio manager standpoint, I always joke, the humble portfolio manager is probably one you want to give and pay some attention to, because if we ever get too big for our britches, Murphy's Law isn't too far removed from anything we do. So I worry about everything, and I take nothing for granted, and I'm always, concerned about what's going to happen tomorrow.
Right. Yeah. And it's just if we had a crystal ball, this job would be so much easier.
Yeah, I can't find it.
And I wanted to delve in just a little bit. With my military background, I am just a big believer in teams, and we've kind of touched on this a little bit. But you're super. You've got a big niche that's going to take care of a lot of my clients, and and I can't be all things to all people. So I'm going to be thrilled to have you as part of my team, and I want to surround myself with experts like you. Can you just talk a little bit, how have you developed relationships in your career? Because you've been in this business for 30 years. So, I think we'd be interested to know how you do relationship building, and because that makes a connector point for all of us.
Well, one strong attribute about me is that I surround myself with really, really smart people, and I listen. So when I first got into the business, I remember literally the very first day that my mentor taught me a lot of different things, but the immediate lesson was, you don't know anything, and everything you think you know is wrong, and everything you were taught is wrong and not applicable to the real world. So don't come to me with any ideas or tell me anything about what you learned in school. If you come up with a new idea that you learn under me, I want to hear it, and we can talk about it all day long. But don't ever start a sentence, well, in college we, because that would be a non-starter. So I had a great mentor from day one, and I just continued to surround myself with the people who have been most successful in my industry and money management. And I listen. I try to listen more than I talk, and I pay attention to those lessons. And they're valuable. Other people's experience is invaluable because the situations in markets change all the time. But how you react to them as a portfolio manager, how you separate the emotion from the mathematics, from the metrics, those are things that are incredibly important. And I've learned from some of the best. Just very, very fortunate also being in the right place at the right time and paying enough attention to take advantages of those opportunities. I'm not the smartest person that's ever come down the street, but I definitely surround myself with those that are.
And I love that you say that about having a mentor. And, as I started off from my military to my business, I realized, like, I don't think you ever stop having mentors in your life, because there's always something more to learn. You know what you know, but it's always nice to keep building that expertise. And I almost feel like in the role that I play, I'm almost as much of a financial coach as I am an advisor, because I can give people a plan, but then there's that piece to make sure that they understand it. And I always try to tell people, if there's anything you're doing and you don't know why you're doing it, then that's a problem, because every single thing that I discuss with you that you're doing, there's a reason behind it. So don't ever just look at something and go, I guess it must be right. And like I tell my clients, they don't need to know how to invest and pick stocks, but they should know big picture, like, why do we have some money that's safe, and why do we have some money that's exposed to risk and growing, and understanding that. So I appreciate that you have mentors as well. It's always, sometimes you look at people like you who are so successful and are kind of at the top of the mountain. You're like, well, they must know everything. And it's nice to hear that we always need mentors. And I'm sure at this point, you're probably mentoring your team and bringing new people along, like was done for you.
Well, I think you have to. I mean, one of the greatest things is, when I was getting into the business as a young person, I would have the moxie to pick up the phone and call people and ask them their opinions. And I remember those people that didn't call me back, and I remember those that did and would take time to talk to some young, crazy kid. But when college students call me or email me or reach out to me on Twitter, I try to make a point of having a phone conversation with them to allow them to access any question. Like, ask me what, the stupidest thing I did, or the mistakes or that I made, or the biggest screw ups or the worst trades, because that's how you learn. And to your previous comment, every trade we make isn't right. Every stock that we buy doesn't go up, but having an answer and an explanation for everything we do is what allows financial advisors to have confidence in our approach, because we're always explaining, here's why we did it, whether and as it's performing well or as it's performing poorly. We can continue to go through that rationale, and when we make a mistake, we're not afraid to sell a stock and say, sometimes the economics change. Sometimes the homework we did relates to historical numbers, and they didn't meet what we thought they would moving forward. But having a rules-based process and a system in place and being able to articulate that easily is really important, because to your point, even with retail clients, financial advisors, or institutions, you never want to deal with the confused mind. You want people to understand most of what's going on, especially when it comes to their money.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, I think you're right. I think we're going to have to do another call to talk about covered calls, but can you just kind of give a high level strategic view of why do you have covered calls as part of your strategy? Because that's fairly unique, I think.
Yeah, we utilize a covered call approach to help mitigate some of the volatility in markets. We use them to buffer a little bit of the downside. The trade-off with covered call writing is that you potentially forfeit and give up some of the opportunity to the upside. And I think we can come on and do just the whole covered call primer next time, or tutorial next time. But covered call writing is selling someone the right to buy a stock that we own, and in the method that we use, for a price higher than it is today, for a point in the future, typically about 30 days. So if we have a stock that's trading for a hypothetical $100 a share, we'll sell someone the right to buy it from us at $105 within the next month. And for that, we'll receive a premium. It's very similar to lease options in real estate, where people may lock in a price on a property for a defined period of time. the forfeiture and the risk on our side is twofold. One, that $100 stock could conceivably go to zero. That would stink, but
Yeah.
could happen. The other risk is that the stock that we've agreed to sell at 105 for the next 30 days could go to 115. And we're contractually obligated to sell it at that 105, and we've potentially left some money on the table. But people far smarter than me that have taught me this business have said that you never lose money taking a profit. So with the covered call writing approach, thank you for laughing. From a call writing approach, you're going to make some, but not all of the upside. And we go into our strategy explanation with that in mind. But again, with that downside capture, all those premiums are helping us to smooth out a ride and protect a little bit of the downside. And in the book, we talk about covered call writing in a combination with dividends, specifically dividend growth, as a means for clients, and again, that retiree baby boomer market to be able to generate cash flow, increasing for a really long retirement.
I love how you said that you never lose money taking a profit. And I think what you've really just described is that's why we work with professionals like you, is you've taken the gambling out of it. And you've got a process so that you don't get lured in like, oh, it might be here, here, here. You have a process that works and you stick to it. And with our money, we need that stability. So I really, we'll definitely do that call about covered calls. But we're kind of getting further along in the process. So just kind of take a minute to tell us about your book and like who should read it and who's it for?
Well, again, it seems like a shameless plug, but it's called Walk Towards Wealth. It's available on, thank you for the minute to talk about it. It's available on Amazon. Barnes and Noble it's available in an ebook. We're still having a little trouble getting the hard copy up on there. You'll go through this again when your book comes out in a few months. It's on Apple Books, but we're getting a lot. I mean, it's number one on a whole bunch of topics already and categories within Amazon. It's only been available for like a day or two. What I'm most excited about, and I think it's good for everyone to read it, financial advisors, maybe a little bit of a refresher course on covered call writing for individual investors, exposure to something that maybe you didn't have tremendous exposure to before. There's some neat stories about me that kind of break up the monotony of a textbook. And all the proceeds, all the profits are going to the Council for Economic Education, which is a wonderful nonprofit dedicated to helping students, young people, to get exposure to financial literacy, and in super cool ways through games and tutorials and lessons and seminars and contests, everything that I didn't have as I was fascinated by this event in 1987 with zero financial literacy. This exposes students to learn things that I never did, and having spoken with you, Tara, that I know you didn't as well. So the more you're exposed to something at a younger age, it becomes much more natural. And it also, I think, helps take away some of that emotion that you talked about before, and that gambling aspect, and teaches you the power of long-term compounding, long-term savings, and true investing.
I love it. So if people want to get a hold of your book or get a hold of you, how do they connect with you?
So we're if you can follow me on Twitter, I think that helps to get access to some bulk discounts. I'm at Covered Calls. So at Covered Calls is our Twitter. You can also go to walktowardwealth.com, which is the book website. And then my corporate website for any financial advisors who are interested in learning more about our strategies. I do it both as an SMA, as you mentioned. Also, we have an exchange traded fund. The symbol is DIVO, and we're at capitalwealthplanning.com. And happy to happy to help with anything we can. And certainly any books that you purchase will go towards an amazingly wonderful cause. And who doesn't want to help out students?
That's wonderful. So just to put you on the spot for a little bit, is we've talked about a lot of things on this call. You have great values. We talked about being a fiduciary. If there was kind of one bonus concept or just like one takeaway that you'd want people who are listening to the call today to have, what do you think that would be?
Well, I think we've talked about it the entire conversation, which is just having a longer term approach and realistic expectations of what you can do with investing. It's not trying to buy a lottery ticket or a scratch off and making everything in one fell swoop, but it's a dedication over time to accumulating real generational wealth for you, your family, your children, charities, grandchildren. And it can be done. It can be done by anyone. You don't need to be born into a trust fund. You don't need to have a massive income stream. It's just that constant savings. The sooner you start, the more consistent that you're applying those saving habits, and working with great financial advisors like you to make sure that they're being allocated in the appropriate allocations. It's not easy to accumulate wealth, but it's certainly not impossible, and it's doable for anyone at any income level. The key is, starting as early as possible, in my humble opinion.
Okay. Yeah. I love that, Kevin. Thank you for sharing that, because I think people get wrapped around, my book, I talk about, there's the variable of rate of return, time, and then just investing. And it's really interesting when you do the numbers to go, rate of return is great, but much more important is if you start earlier is always better. And then you have to save. Like, saving is the foundation of everything, because it takes money to start making that money. And there's not going to be like this one magical, if you would have bought Google or Apple way back in the day, you might have had that, but that doesn't happen very often. So I really appreciate you shared that. And Kevin has done a nice job, I think, of talking about, he looks at the market, the downside, because we're all good with the upside. So really, where you need an expert like Kevin, and why you want to work with a professional versus trying to do it yourself, is he's done it for 30 years. And none of us has that crystal ball to know exactly when, but Kevin has actual rules-based strategy. So it's not like he's just up there guessing. And I think that's really important, that he's got a process. And now he's got a book. And I've had a chance to peek at Kevin's book, and I can't wait to sit down and go through it again, because it's going to be one of those books where I mark pages, because I'm like, oh, that's a great educational piece. And it's going to be one of those books that you can take when you sit down with your financial advisor and go, hey, this is what I want to do. How does this, to be able to ask good questions. So Kevin, I really thank you for sharing with us some of your expertise and your time. And I think we're all going to look forward to reading your book. So just one more time, Kevin, remind us, how does someone get a pre-order or order of your book now?
Amazon.com, Walk Toward Wealth.
Amazon.com. We can all remember that. So don't forget that you can reach out and share this interview with anybody that that wasn't able to listen to it today. And you can actually go back and listen to it again if you missed something and didn't get to take the notes. Kevin, thank you so much for being our guest, and we look forward to your future success. Good luck with the book.
Thank you, Tara. Wishing you wealth and success as well. Talk to you soon.
All right. Bye, everybody.